What's up and welcome to the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore high-performing teams and individuals, dig deep and find out what makes them tick. Whether it's in sports, business, the military, or everyday life, this show highlights the DNA shared by elite performers, the process through which they leverage that talent, and ultimately, it helps you apply those lessons to your own life, business, or team. Ken, so what has you excited these days, man?
Well, I'm always working around my purpose, and I've probably clearly defined that about 10 years ago. It's funny, I was probably given my purpose about 30 years ago, but I didn't really realize it till about 10 years ago. But I kind of broke it down into my own language, and I am that I help others achieve more than they believe they could through my words, my actions, and my serving them. What gets me excited every day is just like, how do I love and serve the people that I'm around to help them grow and achieve the things that they want to achieve, which sounds pretty simple, kind of like being Santa Claus 365 days a year.
It's good old-fashioned servant leadership, right?
Yes, sir.
So you said it was given to you a while ago, but you didn't realize it at the time. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I had a high school coach named Ron Becker who changed my life. I mean, when I was a freshman in high school, he stumbled upon our tiny town in New Mexico, and he gave me some lessons that like changed my life. You know, he challenged kind of the way I was thinking and the way I was showing up, and it was just so powerful. And as I played for him for 4 years, and then I left and went on to college and got into even my baseball career. I used to go back and help him coach. And it was really powerful when I started seeing the lives he was changing every day or every year and how impactful that was. And I'm like, wow, man, he changed my life, but he changes a lot of lives, which is so powerful. And I really started understanding how and why he was doing it. And that in itself just was my purpose. I just didn't know it because when I think about people and I always ask them, well, what's your purpose? They don't really know. They're generally like, well, I'm just going to show up and do my job the best I can and try to support my family and, da 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 da. There's all these things that people show up as each day. But what I realized in later on in life was like, wow, he gave me that purpose. And that was to help others become better than they even believed they could. And that's what just really drives me these days is like, how do I give that to other people, the gift that he gave to me?
Yeah, that's amazing. One thing that I took from you years ago, and it's always stuck with me, was you were always very, very thoughtful, very deliberate about hiring and about building your team, in Arizona. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember coming in, I guess it was the tail end of 2010 and into that off season, and was charged with sort of overseeing your group. And come in and figure out quickly that like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And so you guys had a good thing going on. And I learned in our years together that you were, you wanted to hire your replacement someday, right? And you wanted that guy to hire his replacement. And it can sound sort of trite and easy to say. It's hard to do, right? It's hard to do for a few reasons. It's hard to do because that person's hard to find. It's hard to do because you've got to be secure enough to actually do it and bring in somebody that might be more talented than you, right? And might actually take your job someday. But you did that. You walked that walk, and I saw you do it time and time and time again. I took that with me. I still follow that same philosophy to this day. And it was really powerful. And you've had a ton of success doing that, sort of on the field and off the field.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the acknowledgement, and yeah, it really is a delicate slope. When I listen to most leaders, um, they're worried about guiding and directing, all the people and things below them. And what I've figured out, one of the most powerful lessons I've ever figured out is there's way more power in the team than there is in you. And when you can really step back and understand that and grasp the reality of it, then you can become a really powerful leader. I've always said that everybody I hire, I'm like, I'm not hiring you to be an assistant, or I'm hiring you to take my job because that's really what I want to happen. And I think then you got to live by that. You can't just say it. But, I knew one of my gifts when I was younger is selecting good people. There's something about building a great team and selecting good people that I have a strength in. And the beauty is what we've developed is the team selects everybody that comes on the team. They develop everybody that comes on the team. And they also decide when it's time for you to leave. You know, if you're not holding your end of the bargain up, I always say people may call me the boss or whatever. I'm like, I'm not the boss. I'm just part of an extraordinary team. And that team does everything together. And so, you know, if you're not holding your end of the bargain up, then the team will eventually decide that you're not worthy of hanging there. So that's the beauty. You know, I never hire or fire anyone. I'm just part of a group that goes out and is seeking elite people to create, you know, what we want or what our purpose is, which is to be the best sports medicine and performance team on the planet. And it's been really great journey, and it's actually evolved out into hopefully helping coaches and front office people see maybe a different way to do some things. And I'm probably most proud of that. Like, I would call it leading from the middle, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you have done an amazing job with that, and creating and building that self-regulating culture. It's you're there now, right? But that took some heavy lifting, I'm sure, and there were some bumps along the way, and people that you thought may have been good fits that wound up not being fits, right? Because that culture evolves, and that self-policing is awesome when it happens, right? But it's hard to get there.
Yeah.
And you and I have had conversations over the years about the impact and the just how powerful the people behind the scenes but in the clubhouse can be on that culture, right? And you're like right at the center of that, where
Yeah.
you're positioned in a unique spot within the organization where you're kind of the center of the spoke between the front office, between the coaching staff, between the players, and you're in it every day. So
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter what the GM says, the manager says. To some extent, if you guys aren't bought in and aligned, you can kind of sabotage that,
Yeah.
or undermine that without even realizing it. You guys have done a great job of kind of driving.
Not totally. I think Billy. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's a delicate slope because, you know, I always try to educate our people on we can either be a positive or negative influence. And, you know, our goal is always to be positive, and because the focus is on how do we win and how do we develop our player to go out there and perform at his absolute best. And when you're all committed to that, then it makes it a lot easier. If there's not alignment to the point you made, then it can get a little disruptive and things won't work as smooth as it could. So we feel really a big burden of responsibility in all of that. It's our job to make sure that the players and everyone are bought into the same concept.
When did you, in your career, maybe you always knew it, but at what point did you realize sort of the potential for impact outside of the technical proficiencies you have, right, with player health, from a leadership, from a culture, from a team building perspective? Did you kind of know that from day one, or appreciate kind of the unique opportunity that you had?
No, I mean, I've been in baseball 35 years, and I would say it wasn't until the last 10 to 15, having been with the Diamondbacks. This is my 20th year, and we've been through, I don't know, 4 different GMs, regimes. And, you know, I think what our group set out to be is like, let's take care of our business. Let's be the best sports medicine performance team on the planet. And that's all that we can control. So let's control the things we can control. And as the new regimes would come through, I think the word started to spread. Hey, these guys are committed, man. They're going all out to be the best they can be, which includes picking great people, developing them, making sure that we're all developing ourselves, having a, you know, accountability or responsibility to each other, where we're growing each other. Me as the leader, I always tell the people that follow me, I need to hear what I need to hear, not what you think I want to hear, because that doesn't help me become a better leader for you. So I think it's establishing that space that we can all work from. But it wasn't until the last, I think, I mean, really, when Mike Hazen and those guys came in, that I think, you know, Mike started to go, what are these guys doing? Because we're producing a lot of really good people that are running other teams. And to be honest, I had to step back myself and go, wow, how are we doing this? Like, we've got some incredible people running other teams. And some of them have been really successful, and some have had some speed bumps. But created me to step back and find some reflection points on how are we doing this. And so I just started putting it all down on paper. Inevitably, I kind of teach a lot of different people or businesses, or I actually have a course that I taught not too long ago called the Ultimate Team Building Experience. And I call it an experience because it's not really a course. It's just like putting the concepts out there and seeing what people already have in their system or what they can use to upgrade their systems. And when I really started putting it all down, I'm like, okay, that's how we've had the success. So how do we continue to build upon that and make it better? But that wasn't really till honestly the last 10 years. And, again, hats off to Mike Hazen and Amiel and those guys really opened up the floors for us to expand some of the systems we were using out to the coaches and the front office and people like that. Because I'm a firm believer in, if you have to pay attention to the results you're getting, because if you don't, then you don't know if your systems are very good. But to me, people, systems, awareness are all things that create results. You're either going to get results good or you're not. And if you're not getting them, I think you got to step back and look at your people and your systems.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head there, right? Like you and I are both, I think, have a bias toward culture and people, and you did it. I think at least my read on it, you did it in a very organic way, right? You did it based probably on an individual, one by one, person by person basis, and then you look up after X number of years, and you've got this sort of tribe around you of people that are aligned and talented, and so on and so forth. But if you're not producing results, nobody really cares, right? And that's where
Yeah.
where the chairs I used to sit in is the same thing. It's like you can have the best process, you can have the best sort of people around you, the decisions can be right, and if you don't win, nobody cares. You're not going to be around
Yeah.
to sort of to enjoy the fruits of all that cool stuff you've been trying to work on. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it was for you to kind of, because you and I crossed paths. You hadn't, I don't think that tree that is now sort of permeated throughout the whole league. Maybe it was early stages or hadn't. I know PJ went over to the Cubs. Maybe it was the first one, at least that I was aware of. Now those guys that have sort of come from that Diamondbacks tree are all over the place. So when you look up and you have those kind of results, you're like, oh, maybe I should pay attention to. We are doing something right, and kind of codifying that a little bit is to the process rather than just getting up and it kind of being in your DNA. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you don't step back and take a broader view or like a 10,000-foot view, you just get in the day-to-day grind of what it takes to continue to get the results that you have, and that's important. But it's when you can pull back out of it and go, okay, look, we're getting good results, but what are some things that we can actually tweak in our system that can create even better results? And because you have to be, I think any good system is adaptable. It has to be able to adapt, and that goes for I think just evolution in itself. You don't adapt, you die. So, I've learned a lot from a guy named Steve Chandler. Opened my eyes to just systems. Like everything we do every day is a system. Like how do you get dressed in the morning and get to work on time? Well, you have a system. You get up and you take a shower and you do whatever. You brush your teeth and then you put your shoes on. But if you're late every day to work, then you got to question my system. Maybe my system needs to be altered, or it needs to start a little earlier, or whatever it is. And you start looking at everything you do, it's really a system, which is pretty powerful when I started to understand that. And then you can start to modify, and you're going to get the results that are set up for your system. So if you're getting bad results, your system's bad. You need to look at a different option, maybe just modifying it. And I think that's when you step out and take that 10,000-foot view. It allows you to make those modifications and get to places quicker than what you would if you just keep sticking your head down and grinding, because that's important too. But like you need some guidance in the middle of all that.
Sure. And you talked about your career, right? And this is, you say 10 or 20 years at the Diamondbacks now?
20, yeah, this is my 20th year.
So you had three stops before that, right? Tampa, Atlanta.
Yeah, I started with the Pirates, and then the Braves, and then the Rays, and then here. So all I know is baseball. I don't know much else.
So you obviously picked up a lot along the way, right? And you even talked about how you didn't really probably appreciate or understand a lot of sort of what makes you good at what you do and makes the team that you're on good at what they do until the last decade or so, right? And that's just sort of you learn from different experiences, good and bad, right? And so you were a
Yeah.
part of you were part of a great Atlanta team, right, at the time,
Mhm.
with an incredible rotation. I heard a fun fact about you with 300 wins, and
Yeah.
the last three guys to do it have a Ken Crenshaw thumbprint on them somewhere. If you look close enough, and so
Yeah.
just being around, um, and even if you're with one organization the whole time, I think there's value in just getting exposed to different things. But coming from or touching four different organizations. I mean, let's just look at those three guys, the 300 winners, right? So we're talking about Maddox and Glavin when you were in Atlanta, and then Randy Johnson when you were in Arizona.
Yeah.
Those are three very different styles of pitchers, personalities, backgrounds, career trajectories, you name it, right? They all get there very different ways. So just using that as sort of the example, what do you take away from, you know, extreme high performance guys that can go do elite things? There's different ways to skin that cat, right? But they all got there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what would I take away from them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, when I was in Atlanta, I was kind of more the background music than I was the main music because we had some other people that were, I was in the strength and conditioning department. And, you know, when I step back and I watch, yeah, it's funny, man, I probably had like 10 or 15 players in there in the Hall of Fame. And I always like step
Incredible.
back and go, okay, what is it about those players that separate them from others? And one of them is just like they know how to compete when it counts, like in today's world. I mean, I actually coach a lot of kids, just like individual, like hitting stuff and whatnot. And I've coached basketball for like 20 years, and we've developed a lot of practice players. I think, there's cages and indoor facilities, and there's a lot of like kids or players that can do it there, but then they can't do it when the game starts. And so when I step back and look at those guys, man, they could compete. And they may be hurt, but they always found a way to go out there and compete, and just really focus in the moment. And I think that's probably the separating factor for me is they could really lock it in the moment, and they just knew how to compete. Because today there's a lot of metrics and things like that really get players off their best game, in my opinion, at times. I mean, there's all of the analytics and the things that go in, and those are important because I think they can refine what you do. But sometimes players become so attuned to that they forget to just compete. And I look at it from a hitting lens. I mean, it's hard to hit. Like it's a difficult task to be able to hit major league pitching. And then the pitchers, you hear them talking, and man, they act like hitters never get out. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, you
Yeah.
guys are not
Right.
thinking about. Let me just go out and compete. So it's
Mm-hmm.
funny to hear both sides of the coin. But the most elite ones, they can hone in when it really counts and do it on the biggest stage. At least that's my perception of the elites that I've been around.
It's amazing how that's the takeaway, right? I mean, it seems so simple and fundamental, but you're right. Like there's all of this noise around that right now. When I say noise, I don't mean it's useless. I'm just saying that you can be really, the analogy I use is like the morbidly obese guy in the gym who's in there doing forearm curls. And you're like, buddy, you're
Mm-hmm.
focused on the wrong stuff, like get
Yep.
in there and do some different things
Yeah.
to get you closer to where you want to be. And
Yeah.
that's a little bit like what some players can be. They can just be so focused on this one metric or one thing, one new trick they're trying to learn, right? That they may just go out there and
Yep.
compete. And your point about it starts in youth baseball, it starts in youth sports, right? Like we would talk
Yeah.
about it a lot with Latin American players because they didn't play a lot of games. It was a showcase, culture, right? That's how they got signed. Throw hard,
Yeah.
run fast, hit them far in BP. And then when the games start, some of those guys can never adapt because they're just not used to playing the game. And
Yeah.
we're seeing that now with some of the travel ball and showcase type stuff that goes on. And it's not just baseball; it's anywhere, right? But yeah, like
Right.
just that compete gene. Like
Yep.
obviously those three guys had it, but that's interesting. I know you're a John Wooden fan,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was kind of that was a big part of the impetus for me starting this and kind of where I draw the name and everything else now when I was watching, right? It's character and characters what you do when nobody's watching, but also a lot of that winning takes place behind the scenes, right? Everybody sees the hoisting the trophy after game 7, but like that team had kind of won, or that person had already kind of won long before that based on what they put in. And what are things that you take away from guys, whether it's the best of the best or just the guys that work, again, get back to routine and systems, like the guys that, whether it's the weight room, whether it's just sort of recovery or whatever it may be, that take care of themselves either in the off season or during the season. I mean, 162 games is a long haul. What are some of the things you've learned maybe from players that you've seen have worked?
Yeah, if I oriented it around John Wooden, which I do a lot, my high school coach was a John Wooden protege, like it's what he taught. And that's why I remember it so well. In high school, he always taught the pyramid of success. And so like each week would be
Yeah.
focused on one of those building blocks. And I never forgot the very top of the pyramid, which is called competitive greatness. And it's called competitive greatness, but it's defined by being your best when your absolute best is called for, and your absolute best is called for every day. And I was like, wow, that's pretty profound. I didn't really understand that till later on after I started coaching with my coach, but I'm like, wow, that was powerful. But none of that happens at the top of that pyramid, when we're talking about the guys we just were or all the elites. They compete their best when it's called for, and but without the base of the pyramid and all of the really important things that go on down there, which is your process. Like John Wood never talked about winning ever. He just talked about being your best, whatever your best was that day. And that really stuck home with me too. And you've probably heard the term, yeah, work the process, and it's been probably cut up 15 different ways, but I think the process or the system or the pieces of the building blocks at the bottom of the pyramid make it strong. If you don't have some really good building blocks down there, like a good work ethic and a good compete mentality and the things that are really important that are going to carry you when it really gets crunch time, then your pyramid's going to be weak and it's going to fall apart. So those things that I see are can be clearly defined, and each player has to define which pieces of their own pyramid that they want to create. And I think that's where the power is, because all of the elite guys have subtly different pyramids, if you will, and they set them up differently, but they all have a process, and that process eventually leads to them competing very well, is what I've seen. And not only just one time, but like, can you sustain it? You know, John Wooden always talked about character and courage, and it really takes character and courage to be able to do it over and over again. Because when you have success, the easy thing is to back off the throttle, and so it takes a lot of character to be able to sustain it and do it again. And that's just one of the reasons that I always really follow a lot of his teachings. And by the way, he struggled big time. If you go look at his career, he wasn't very good early on in his career. Actually,
Yeah.
almost got fired at UCLA.
Yep.
And yeah, then it all kind of came together for him. But just what he taught in so many areas is so powerful. I have so many quotes in my mind. Like one of them is like leadership. And he always said leadership. The best example of leadership is your own personal example. And so I try to live that myself. I'm like, I can talk about all of the people that I work with and how I want them to become great leaders. But if I don't actually be that myself and be an example for them, then it's really all for naught. So I've simplified down, who you're being is way more powerful than anything you can say. And that's who you show up as each day. And that's really important stuff. And I think all of the elite performers, they probably have that figured out in their own language. They don't know what, if I told somebody being, they may like, what is being? And I'm like, well, that's who you show up as every day. But they all have some sort of framework around that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The foundation piece of that is like anything, right? The building, the foundation, those aren't the sexy elements, right? A lot of people don't want to spend time on it. They don't care about it. Right. But to your point, everybody
Yeah.
that's successful has it. I'm curious if you've seen an evolution in players, or for that matter, staff, with the climate right now, with everything's immediate gratification, everything's on social media. every highlight that you have in your life has got to go out to the internet so the whole world can celebrate you. You don't see a lot of the, I'm on a cross country flight and I'm got my nose in a book the whole time, while everybody's asleep. You
Yeah.
don't see that stuff that foundational work. Have you seen any sort of shift from your perspective on maybe the approach to that or the appreciation for it?
Well, I mean, I think, kids and players are all different now. We all are, aren't we? I mean, like we have our iPhones and social media and all these things that can probably distract us from having the most intent on what we really want to achieve. And it's also um, I call it an enoughness meter. It's if you're on social media a lot and you're looking to be liked a lot, then basically you're looking for somebody to say you're good enough,
Right.
and if
Right.
not, we have enough judgment on ourselves is the way I look at it. So I don't really use any of that to put any judgment on myself, but I think enough players do. Or somebody said this, or I got this many likes, and really all you're doing is stirring your own internal hardware of not being good enough. And I think all humans, we have that to a degree, and some people it drives to a great place, but there are limitations. Even though it drives them to a great place, there's still, it's the people that say, if I make X amount of money and I get a new house and car and all this and that and the other, I'm going to be happy, and they're still not happy. And I think that's when we really got to step back from all the social media and the instant gratification of the phone and our society, and go, what really creates happiness, I think, in your own mind is your own thoughts. Like, how do you organize those and really, have gratitude around the things that we do have? And at least that's the way I view it. And when I coach the people that I coach in terms of personal development, it's like, can you really consider that your mind is creating these thoughts that create these emotions that lead to some sort of beliefs? And I'm a big proponent of taking those thoughts. If you can become a master of your thoughts, and you realize, oh, I'm having this really bad thought, and then in the moment you have a choice to either follow through with that bad thought or just go, you know what, I'm going to change the way I'm thinking here. And you can look at it as that's a problem, or maybe it's just a great opportunity. And I think if you can just become a master of that, just flipping your thoughts in there, then it doesn't run all the way downhill and create, emotions that create more bad thoughts. So, you really, I think if you focus on creating your future, it keeps you from dragging your past along or reliving back into the past, because creation and the future is really powerful, and it's really freeing, and it creates happiness and all the things I think people are looking for. But that phone and the social media will bring your past along with you if you're not careful.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen to that. Yeah. It's the difference between, having internal drivers and external drivers, and,
Right.
and there's the external drivers have, multiplied tenfold the last, whatever year, 10 years, you pick a number. It is hard. It can be hard to block out that noise, and
Yeah.
I'm not a pro athlete with millions of people interested in what I do on a nightly basis. Right. So that if you don't have that inner drive to be able to, you know, just say it doesn't really matter what anybody says or thinks. I'm going to go do my thing. And at the same time, knowing, never really settling, right? If I win this award, if I win this many games a year, whatever, like, then I'll be happy, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, well then what happens when you wake up the next day? Like, are you just going to check out, and just kind of coast for the rest? And so one thing I want to touch on with you is that you are, you're definitely like a people connector. You've got a bias toward people. Do you think that comes from? I've heard you talk about how you think it may have a tie to your upbringing, right? You grew up on a ranch, grew up around animals.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you have like a little sixth sense? You said you realized it at an early age that
Yeah. Yeah.
you could read people well, right? And personnel selection.
Yeah. I love asking people, hey, what's your superpower? Just to hear what they think, because we all have these like things that we're really good at. And so I was asked mine, well, what's your superpower? And I'm like, well, mine's like a sixth sense. I don't know. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I always felt like you had to have awareness around, cow might kick you, or a horse run you over, snake bite you, all kinds of things go on out in the
Yeah.
ranch and where I grew up. So you had to have this awareness, I guess. I call it a sixth sense, but awareness around all of these things, or something negative could have happened. And I think now it's evolved into the hardest thing to teach, I think, is awareness. Like, how do you teach people awareness? And you know, it's when you can really become aware of the things that you don't know, you can really go some powerful places. Because it's like in humans, you can watch somebody else and go, wow, that guy's really got his blinders on, or wow, she's really got her head in the sand there. And you can see it in others, but what you don't do is see it in yourself.
Right.
and
Right.
and so that's the coolest thing that I've got, is that that incredible team around me that shows me where I may have my head in the sand. And I think that's the power of it. Like when you can really understand and you have people around you that show you where you're limited, or where you got your parking brake on, I love to say. And if you can have that kind of a team, that's where I'm really interested in how do you create the best teams. And it doesn't matter if it's sports medicine performance team, if it's the Diamondbacks organization, if it's a relationship with your wife and your family. Those are all teams. You know, you probably play on multiple teams yourself. Everybody kind of does. So it's like, how do I get the most out of all those teams? And a lot of the principles are very much the same. But one of them, the biggest one, is creating awareness. And I think your teammates can give you that if you're open to it. But you gotta put your big pants on to play in that water. And a lot of people
Yeah.
they don't want to
Yeah.
hear what they need to hear. And I have a saying, man, I love you so much that I'm gonna hopefully help you see something that you don't want to see. And the same for me. Help me see something that I can't see.
Yeah, well, it ties to your earlier point, right? You've got to walk that walk as a leader, and
Mm.
you're spot on. Like, I've done some, sort of self assessments and team three type exercises, and everybody's all game for it when it's academic, and then it's like, look, man,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hit you between the eyes with something, and you can hit
Yeah.
me right back. That's fine. It's just hard.
Yeah.
It's hard for some people to hear that, right? It's human nature. You don't like hearing negative things
Well,
about
yeah.
yourself, but like you got to be open to it.
Right. The other thing too, Billy, that I've figured out is that the leaders, they all want to tell everybody else below them what they need to do to get better,
Right.
but they never want to hear
Right.
what they
Yeah.
need to do to get better.
Yeah.
And I,
No.
and I
Right.
always ask that question, well, who tells you what you need to do better? And they never have an answer, because they haven't created that environment for the people around them to actually give them what they need to get better. And there's nobody else to point the finger at but themselves. We just call that ownership. And that's the beauty of, I want to create that with my team, because I want to grow myself. I'm not okay with just, punching the time clock and being paid, and just having a job. That's not my thing. I've just grown way past that. I'm like, no, I want to make a difference. And to do that, sometimes you got to get uncomfortable and get in spots that you really don't feel comfortable with, to find those areas. And that's really the power in having a great team around you.
Did that take you some time to create? Because I've had experiences myself where I want the same thing, right? You want that
Mhm.
sort of radical candor, open environment where you can have, but
Yeah.
that's tough for people to do. It's especially if your boss is saying it. You're like, I don't know if I trust this guy. He might be just trying to set me up. Like, it take you some time to kind of create that.
Absolutely. You just said something there that tipped me off, is what we all learn in the space of language, right? Like everything we've ever learned on the planet here is in the space of language. Like somebody said something and then we resonated with, oh, that's a dog. Okay, it's a dog. We learned it in language, and you said something, that's tough. And what I hear a lot from leaders, like, or just people, is like, well, I'm going to have a tough conversation with them, or I'm going to have a really hard conversation with them. And I'm just like, I don't use those words, because first of all, if I'm going to step into a conversation that's tough or hard, I've already like predetermined that it's going to be rough.
Yeah, it's
All
not
I
going to go well.
say,
Yeah.
no, all I say is this is a crucial conversation to a great team. Like I'm going to have that conversation with that person. And if I rephrase it by being crucial to the success of our team, it's totally different place than a tough conversation or a hard conversation. And so the other thing that I've figured out is maybe it's not me that needs that to have the conversation. The power of the team, man, that wins every time. It's like, hey, look, the whole team is seeing this in you. and we need you to be your best to make our team the best. And when you phrase it that way, it's all in language. When you think about it, it's like how those words get laid out on the table in a responsible way can make a huge difference in the way that person learns and or takes the information that they need to make themselves better, which makes the team better.
Yeah, no doubt. And that actually ties me to another point I wanted to make was it's real easy to have, some slogans and some buzzwords, slap them on a bumper sticker and a t-shirt and say, hey, here's our culture. And it's totally different for that to actually be impactful, for it to be transformative, for it to be sustainable. And I know you've gone through the exercise of trying to codify that for yourself, obviously, like just the very beginning of this conversation, right? You just rattled sort of personal mission statement, right? And you've done that for your team as well. And I've always felt like that's really difficult to do because in my mind, it's all great cultures, all great missions that they're simple, right? Like to your point about systems and processes being broadly applicable, they're simple. So you could only almost copy and paste for pro sports team or an investment bank or a farm, and it doesn't matter because they can make that relate back to their life and their mission, but it's authentic, right? And it's meaningful. And so doing that in a way that's actually going to move people and inspire them is challenging, and it takes a lot of thought and time to build that. Can you walk through a little bit sort of the exercise you went through?
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things people don't really understand complex. You know, I have a saying, simple is hard. Being really simple is really hard because, most places that I've seen, they want to create this mission statement, and it's like a paragraph long. And then if I walk in and I'm like, okay, hey, can anyone recite the missions? Nobody can remember it. And they're like, well, it's got this or that, but they can't remember it. So I'm like, people remember small clumps of information. So maybe spaces of 3, right? So, when we sat down with our sports medicine performance team, our vision was just to enhance human performance. Like pretty simple, right? And then our mission is to be the best sports medicine performance team on the planet. Now, what does that look like? There's no metric that shows us that. It's just a mountain that we know we're going to climb every day to get to the top of that. And it holds all of us responsible to that mission. I'm like, well, if we're going to be that, then we have to show up that way all the time. And then we've created our own values underneath it, which are important too. Everybody's got to have a shared understanding of the mission, the purpose, and the values. If it's not shared, and I just as the boss showed up and said, hey, this is what we're going to be, then not everybody's buying in. There's going to be some people like, yeah, that sounds great. Others like, nah, man, I'm not buying that. And they're out. And that's not a good team. So what I've been teaching, in the last 10 years is like, no, it's got to be shared. We all sat down together. That's why I've been started this thing called the Ultimate Team Building Experience, and then walk 3 people through what that process looks like, creating a shared, purpose, I call it. But when we're all bought into the same things, or at least we have ownership in it, some of us have got to share, that becomes powerful because it really ultimately comes down to, like, let's say the boss, if he never asks any of us below him what we think, we don't feel like we're part of the process. But if he asks us, and then maybe he doesn't even use our opinion, but he asks us, that's pretty important start. Hey man, what do you guys think? All right, cool. Now I got to make the ultimate decision, and he's going to make whatever it is. But just asking alone is so powerful, and that creates that shared buy-in by everybody. And I think when I watch, I don't know, like businesses, organizations that struggle, it's too complex of just the simple words you're going to put on the wall. And then most importantly, it can't just be words on the wall. It's like, how do we live it? And how do we come out there every day? And I have a saying that I learned from a really cool friend of mine. And he said, we don't see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are. So we all have these different colored glasses. Your tent is maybe a little green and mine's a little blue, and they're all different. We all have our own different lenses of the way we see the world because we learned that in language. But really, the way we see the world is the way we're being. So if you're being pissed off because you got to go to work every day, guess what? You're going to see a lot of pissed off people at work. Promise you. If you see, uh, if you're being a jerk every day, guess what? You're going to see a lot of those people. If you are being love and service, which I try to show up as every day, then I see a lot of love and serving people that are looking to grow. So it really comes down to the way you show up or who you're being, because we all see the world differently. And I think when everybody can get on the same page as that's when you start to have this team unity and be able to grow something that's way bigger than you. The purpose becomes bigger than you, and that is really fun because you got an incredible group of people working together that love each other, that serve each other. And it's not about loving or serving themselves, right? That's what I think the social media and all the things we talked about earlier do. They create, oh, let me serve me. Let me look at all the likes for me. And it's a very me oriented world we live in now. And that doesn't do anything for me. It's never has. I'm more about what can we do together, as a country or as a sports medicine team or an organization or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think people crave that. I think it's the reason that kids join gangs. It's the reason people get into the military. And I think that in a lot of places, the social media or the technology or whatever it may be, like it's just sort of a substitute for that. Like I was the same way. You get a charge out of being on a team, being part of something bigger than yourself. And if you can't find that, or you just don't really know where to look for it, whether it's sports, a club, an extracurricular activity, like whatever it is, you kind of have to replace that endorphin hit that you get, right? And so then it comes into the clickbait and all this other stuff that they're doing, and it's external factors instead of internal again. But I imagine as just in your time in Arizona, right? The culture and the philosophy, I'm sure, has evolved on a probably daily basis to some extent, and it gets more and more codified and more solid. And I'm sure it's in a much more concrete place now than it was 20 years ago. And so getting back to personnel selection, right? And what you did 20 years ago versus what you do now, are there things that you look for, specific things that fit your team's culture and your environment? Or is it, and are there methodologies that you use, or do you just lean on that, cattle rancher sixth sense of like, I don't know, this guy didn't feel right?
Yeah, no, I'm not going that good. One point you just made is, yeah, we've done a lot of work on kind of remodeling the culture, but I always have to remind, the leaders and that, hey, just because you remodel it doesn't mean it continues to live. You got to water it and grow it and feed it. And that takes constant work. And well, we won, we were in the World Series. So what? Nobody cares about that. What are we going to do right now? And how are we going to create the future that we want? So that's pretty important. That you can't miss that step. And as far as selection goes, no, we have certain criteria. And like if you're going to come work for us, even as an intern, we're going to have 10 people interview you. And I figured that out. Like we all have different angles that we're going to ask our own questions to really sift out, is this a good teammate? Are they open-minded? Do they want to grow? Are they passionate about what they do? And one that I can never sift out on an interview or whatever is like, what kind of work ethic do you have? Because I always say if you have a car and I pop open the hood and you got a go-kart engine in there, we're in trouble. But if you have a diesel engine that'll go and work, we can teach you a lot of things. So that work ethic one, I'm always like digging behind the scenes, trying to find somebody that's not on their reference list, that knows them, that's worked with them, that can define, hey, did they have that kind of engine? Because that's the hardest one to get. And then there's some other pieces, as I mentioned, awareness, like, do they have awareness? And then one of the most important ones that I think I can pick up in an interview is just talking back and forth. What kind of communication style do they have? Are they a good listener? Are they open to hearing things that maybe they don't want to? Because that I've seen allows people to grow the fastest and get to the highest leadership positions, the ones that can communicate the best, not ones that are the best skills all the time, at least in our profession. So I think, those things all come into mind when we're selecting people. And the other one that comes to mind is you don't always select people that are exactly like you. That's the natural tendencies. Oh, I want to pick someone that really fits with all my thoughts, because I figured out that some of the people that we selected that were the toughest to manage grew us the most. And you know some of those people too. You've
Mm-hmm.
actually worked with them. They grew us the most because they would challenge what we're doing. Like, why do we do that? And ask a lot of questions. And so I think the natural tendency for people is to select someone that's, they ain't going to rock the boat any. And I'm not saying pick a bunch of people that all they do is rock the boat, but they rock the boat to figure out why do we do that. And so when you really look at it in that
Yeah. Yeah.
space, it makes your selection process bigger. There's a book called Talent War. Navy SEAL guy wrote it. I highly recommend it. It's a really powerful book on what you can be looking for in the selection process.
Yeah, it's, you bring up a great point about the culture. And it's not a clone factory, right? You're not looking, if you do that, no matter how, you could be the perfect teammate, right? And that's another question I want to get to in a minute. But if you don't, there's no growth in hiring a bunch of people like you, even if you're super talented and have you check all the boxes, right? You're not going to grow. And yeah, it's the ones that you don't want just a bunch of squeaky wheels for the sake of making noise. But I've talked with a lot of folks about that's a big difference for me generationally. People now, forget players or whatever, but people want to know the why. Kids want to know the why. You can't just tell them because I said so. It just doesn't work anymore. And so you've got to, a lot of people, leaders, parents, teachers, you name it, like they get exposed nowadays because they don't really know the why. They're just saying, well, I'm the authority figure and just do it. And when you can't back that up with some substance, be it culture or technique or what have you, then it rings pretty hollow. And so, um,
Yeah,
I
Billy,
embrace similar.
no, it reminds me of something, which I would, encourage any of your listeners. What is your why? Your why is your purpose. Like why was I put on this earth? And really, people have never even thought about it. And when you really can define your why on a piece of paper, not just the thought that you define it. Then I think the next piece is when you create a team together, then your team's going to create a purpose, or you will do it together. Like, hey, what is our purpose? What do we want to do? And then what you find out is that the individual's purpose has to somewhat line up with the team's purpose, or it's going to be a problem. If someone walks in and their purpose is, I'm going to be the greatest solo artist on the planet, and the team's is like, well, our purpose is to work together collaboratively, those two aren't going to match up. So it's like,
Right.
I always ask, what is your purpose? Most people don't know, but it's like, what really, really gets you going? And then does that match up with our team's purpose? And that's when it becomes powerful, and you don't miss on your hiring process, is when you can really match those two up.
Yeah. And it gets back to it being simple, right? Being and being relatable, because you don't want people that all have the same answer to that. You
Yep.
want people that are motivated by different things, but there has to be that intersection somewhere, to your point, right? That it'll either fit or it won't. If they're in stark contrast, obviously it's oil and water. It's not going to work. But another concept that I think fits in that for me, it's a question I ask people all the time, is you and I could probably answer this question very differently. What makes a good teammate? And sometimes it's a simple question, know in your gut, but sometimes people even have trouble answering that. They don't really know what a good teammate is. I mean, what's a good teammate mean to you?
Yeah, well, I know well too much about all this. So when we run any of the team building experiences, or even internally, I've done this. I can't, a lot of times I send out a survey, and I'm like, give me your top 5 things that you think make a great team, or make a great teammate, or whatever. I've just sent survey out, right? Anonymous. And every time the same word will come up. Every time. Like, I've done it 20, 30 times. Every time the same word comes up. Like, what do you think it is?
Selfless.
Trust.
Okay.
It's trust. It's
Yeah.
like, people want to know that they can trust you, right? Are you trustworthy? Do you do what you say you're going to do all the time? It's basically your integrity. They want to know that. And so when you start judging teammates, if you think back, you're like, wow, man, what a talented teammate, but he never showed up. He was never on time, or whatever. You don't it, right? You're like, nice guy, good teammate, but like, hey man, my life's counting on this. Can I
Yeah.
trust you? they really bond to that. So I have kind of two terms that eventually converge into one. Are you trustworthy? Are you consistent? Do you have a track record that shows that you're good at whatever it is you do? That's trustworthy is important. And then there's trust willing. Are you willing to follow somebody else and buy into maybe their concepts? Because there's two ends of that, right? You can be trustworthy, but not trust willing. I don't really want to trust somebody else. And that doesn't make a good team. So I created my own word called trustability. It's like it's two streets, right? Are you trustworthy and are you trust willing? Because when you get those two to match up, then it's really powerful. Does someone have trustability? And I think of these abilities in anything. The Navy SEALs use a term that I've stole and we use in our team called team ability. And team ability is basically, can you lead when it's time to lead, and can you follow when it's time to follow? And that's what makes a lot of their processes, which are life and death, so good, is they have team ability. And that's what I really try to preach in our team is like, hey, I'm not the smartest guy at some of the techniques that we're teaching. So I'm just going to follow whoever the best person, who the best teacher is. And I think that's what good teams do. They have team ability, they have trustability, they have adaptability. I call it abilities. They have certain abilities that really are important because, it's like developmental ability. Can you, as a member of the team, develop somebody by your teaching and who you're being? But also, can you be developed? Like you need to have both ends of the spectrum covered. If not, you're only going to get X amount of success, out of that. So I really like work on abilities. Like, are both sides of your abilities tightened down that you can actually grow yourself and the team?
That's a great point. I mean, because if you don't have the latter, right, then you're in your own head, you're a finished product. There's no more growth to be had. There's no more, I'm not going to follow. A lot of people either can lead, want to lead, are natural born leaders. The follow part can be tricky, because everybody's sort of those who have the alpha, hard charging gene when it comes time and admit, yeah, this guy over here is better than me. And it's in the best interest of the team of which I'm a member that I'm going to follow instead of trying to be the lead dog on this one. And I think it's rare to your point. I mean, you have both.
Yeah. Simon Sinek has a really good little video about high performers and high trust. Yeah,
I was going to bring that one up to you. Yeah. Yeah. But I trust him with my life, but not with my money and my wife. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you really sift this down, which I've done a lot of times, like, what is a great teammate? It's somebody that I can trust and that trusts me. It's like, it's that simple. It's not,
no, you're right.
The rest of it will fall into place, but that's the foundation of my pyramid of team building. The very bottom is trust. Like, you got to have that. If you don't have that, you won't have a good team no matter where it's at. It's no different than your own family and your own wife. It's like, if you have a good trusting relationship, then it's going to be powerful. If you don't trust her, she doesn't trust you, I'm going to say it probably deteriorates.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. Well, Ken, man, this was a ton of fun. Really good to catch up. I appreciate you sharing. It's been too long. Hope we get a chance to catch up with you again in person.
Hey, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, man. It's always good to see you, and I love the space that you're working in, and your purpose on what you're trying to do, which is help others, man. It really resonates to me. So I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe to be notified of future episodes. If you'd like to support the show, please take a second, leave a rating and review, or share it with your friends. If you're interested in similar content, you can check out my website at nooneiswatching.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter, read my blog, or follow me on your social media platform of choice. Look, your time is valuable, so thank you for lending me some.